I think there is this really ephemeral texture to Cindy's work in which she's really presenting herself as a subject of a story that really hits all of these different archetypes in terms of expectation. My name is Gabriella Karefa-Johnson. I am a fashion editor, stylist, and consultant, and the global contributing fashion editor at large for Vogue magazine. I have always been obsessed with fashion. I've always been obsessed with self-presentation and the way that I show up in the world. And the thing about fashion is that what we look like, what we put on our bodies, is supposed to kind of connect with who we think we are or who we want other people to perceive us as. And what I really connect to in Cindy's work is the idea that all of the artifice you're seeing in the photo, it's actually so far removed from the actual subject of the picture. She leaves space for the viewer to insert themselves and to see who they are in the context of that image. And that's a lot like being a fashion editor. When I think about the film stills, I always think about number 21. What's most interesting to me is that it kind of plays with age. She has super heavy makeup on that really gives the assumption that she's like an older woman, but then there is like this girlishness to the clothes that she's wearing. And it feels like somebody who's on the cusp of being a woman, but who is a little bit of a girl in the way that she presents herself outwardly. And in media, in film, TV, in fashion images, we're always trying to grow people up. And so much of our lives is transitioning between who we were and who we're going to be. And this feels, at least fashion-wise, like a young adult who's like, has one leg in girlhood and one leg in womanhood. And it's so much to communicate in a 3/4 portrait. The tension between identifying the true self and figuring out the way that fashion works in your life to project something that is maybe fabricated or other than your truest self is something that's really interesting to play with artistically and pictorially when we're taking fashion images, and is also so prevalent in Cindy's work. It would be a shame to be a fashion editor and to work in fashion without realizing and really owning the fact that we are selling a fantasy more times than not, and that fantasy is being sold to the end of selling a product. But I do think that the other side of the coin, which is really positive, is that fashion allows a sort of empowerment that's hard to get anywhere else in our practical lives. Another point of costuming or fashion that I always think about when I'm looking at Cindy's work is the idea of the dressed versus the undressed. For example, in this film still, number 39, she has on this kind of brown, almost like mouse-ish wig, and it's pulled back in a ponytail, which is like not ideally what you think of when you think of like that bombshell sexy vibe, but she's wearing this like pretty intricate lingerie. And I think the idea is that based on who the viewer is, that lingerie can signify many things. For a woman who's looking at this is a woman undressing before she goes to bed, and there's like a casualness to it. But then there's also this real candidness where you're not sure if she wants to be looked at. I'm very interested in the way that she works with lingerie, and I also find it super fascinating as somebody who has to create images with lingerie. It's always this idea of like, who is the one doing the looking and who is the one being undressed. And I think there's like real tension in this photograph with whether or not this subject wants to be the object of someone's gaze. I'm really interested in how incredibly fashion can operate as a signifier of so many emotions, ideas, like preconceived notions that we don't even think about until we see that one garment. This particular film still, it's number 83, and it was made in 1980. She's wearing this trench coat, which you automatically associate with like secrecy and like espionage and moving in silence. And I think that is such an allegory to what living as a woman is in 2022. You know, the parts of ourselves we hide and conceal, especially in this era of like complete oversharing and selfie culture. To see this image and immediately think of wanting to hide oneself is in and of itself really emotive. And so, you know, there's a malleability to the way that we assign identity to clothing that is really interesting to play with as a fashion editor, and that I think Cindy taps into throughout all of her work.